Part 2. There is no comedy, only cringe. Much like the ghosts the Ghostbusters are trying to bust, the humor in this movie is lacking in life and substance. It just isn't funny. I think there are maybe 2 moments where I thought, okay, that's kinda funny, but even those weren't funny enough to make me laugh, and I don't remember what those parts were. And that's bad for a movie that tries to throw a joke at you every 5 seconds. And that's actually one of the big problems with this movie. It's constantly trying to be funny, and so it's constantly just throwing whatever it can at the wall to see what sticks, as opposed to taking the effort to set up well-timed jokes with wit, misdirection, and subtle implication. But this idea that more jokes somehow equals a funnier movie is a fallacy. It's one of those quality over quantity situations. I mean, I could just sit here and make fart noises into my microphone for 2 hours, but would anyone be entertained by that? Maybe for the first 10 seconds, but not for the whole 2 hours. But that's essentially what this movie is. It's 2 hours of fart noises.
Is it more or less disgusting if I tell you it came from the front?
Now don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying it's literally a bunch of fart noises, because it isn't. But it is in spirit. Get it? Spirit? Because it's a movie that f*** you. Let's compare Ghostbusters 2016 to the original Ghostbusters. You got the dry, sarcastic humor of the original movie, and then you got the loud, obnoxious, zany cartoon humor of Ghostbusters 2016. Now, zany cartoon humor isn't a bad thing in and of itself, but the movie seems to think making something loud and annoying somehow automatically makes it funny. It's trying way too hard at all times, and it just comes across as desperate. It also feels like it's talking down to you like you're some kind of idiot because it's constantly telling you, this is meant to be funny, you should be laughing at this, unlike the original which expects you to pick up on things and derive humor from that. It's the difference between this.
Switch me on.
And this.
Here we go!
And yes, the original movie had its loud, wacky moments, but this movie is almost nothing but those moments, and whenever it's not, it's this awkward improv crap. It's not like the original Ghostbusters was trying to be funny all the time. It's a silly movie with a silly premise, yes, but it still has its serious moments. Even comedies need those because we have to care about something. If literally everything is a joke and we're not meant to take any of it seriously, then why should we care about anything that happens in the movie? Remember that scene where Dana got grabbed by the demonic arms and pulled into the door with Zool? Remember when you saw that for the first time when you were a kid and it made you hard? I mean, it made you piss your pants in fear because it was genuinely scary and it wasn't played for laughs at all, and it gave you the sense that there were some real stakes. That's what Ghostbusters 2016 lacks. It's silly and stupid, and that's all it tries to be, and consequently, everything is trivial, so we don't care about anything that happens in it. There's no investment, it's just a bunch of noise. It's all disposable. This is a disposable movie, one that would have been forgotten about completely if it didn't have the Ghostbusters brand on it. Now, the problem with trying to explain why something isn't funny is that it's hard to do so without comparing it to something that is funny. And the problem with that is you would have to explain why that thing is funny, and the problem with that is the very act of explaining why something is funny makes it unfunny. So the point you're trying to make just ends up getting lost. But I'm gonna do it anyway. As Ralph the Movie Maker pointed out in his review of Minions, comedy is not subjective. Humor is subjective. What makes you laugh is subjective, but comedy is not. Any good joke will follow at least some kind of structure, and there is a definite science to what makes something funny. The most common way to structure a joke is with a setup which establishes some kind of expectation, and then a payoff which subverts that expectation. Take this example from the original Ghostbusters.
Everything was fine with our system until the power grid was shut off by d***less here.
They caused an explosion.
Is this true?
Yes, it's true. This man has no
Now let's break this joke down. Ray explains that it's actually Peck's fault the ghost got loose and calls him d***less. Then Peck accuses them of causing an explosion. The mayor asks if what Peck is saying is true. This establishes an expectation for what follows. Naturally, we will assume Venkman will answer either yes or no, but Venkman deliberately misconstrues the question as if the mayor was asking if it's true that Peck was d***less, to which Venkman answers yes. Now let's be clear, what makes this joke funny is not the fact that Bill Murray said it's the fact that it follows the rules of comedy. It follows a classic setup, expectation, and punchline structure. Now, I was going to explain how and why this works through the lens of Peter McGraw and Caleb Warning's benign violation theory, but I'm about to violate my pants, and not so benignly, so let's take an ad break. A lot of the jokes in Ghostbusters 2016 fall flat because they don't follow the rules of comedy, and a lot of that comes down to the improvisational nature of the movie. Now, improvisation can work sometimes, but you can't improvise everything. I know because when I was in prison, I once tried to improvise a fleshlight out of a shampoo bottle and some wet magazine pages, and it didn't work out too well. That's because the guy I made it for ended up backing out of the trade we agreed on, so I was stuck with this makeshift fleshlight and nothing to shove up my ass. My point is, improvisation isn't always going to lead to good results, and that's why movies have scripts. You can't just do everything on the fly, but that's pretty much what they did here. Paul Feig basically pointed a camera at the actors, told them the gist of what was supposed to be happening in each scene, and just let them make up everything they said. This resulted in hours upon hours of footage from insanely long take after insanely long take, and they just picked out whatever they thought was good in editing.
Can we do 40-minute takes where we just let the camera roll and we'd all be sort of improvising? And
Feig even once tweeted out that there exists a 3.5-hour cut of the movie. I mean, he might have been joking, but it wouldn't surprise me. This resulted in a lot of time-wasting nonsense which somehow managed to worm its way into the final cut. A lot of the movie's humor takes the form of these long, awkward, rambling, irrelevant, gibberish conversations.
Yeah, he probably dances real sexy. You know what I'm saying? Like just a whine.
I don't think his hips move at all. I think he's picked a couple of Swayze.
Oh, you know what was a good one? Roadhouse.
I love Roadhouse.
Point Break.
He was a Point Break.
Come on, at the end with the big wave.
There's a ghost in that.
That's what they're saying, but I'm saying the cat's already out, so it's hard to put the cat back in the bag. But that's why they have that saying, because if the cat is out of the bag, you can't put it back in the bag.
I put a cat in a bag.
Notice how these scenes don't follow any sort of joke structure? Whatever supposed humor there is derived from two characters rambling and wasting time while other characters look on in confusion and annoyance. There are no setups, expectations, punchlines, or wit. It's just, well, these characters can just keep talking and talking endlessly without actually saying anything. Isn't that funny? Why aren't you laughing? Are you some kind of racist gamer chud? Why do you hate women? Women are funny, bro, get over it. Fart noise. Other jokes fall flat because they rely on very surface level understandings of what makes a gag work. Let's look at the scene where Aaron gets puked on.
My name is Erin Gilbert, Doctor of Particle Physics at Columbia.
Now compare this to the equivalent scene from the original Ghostbusters.
Batman, what happened? Are you okay?
He slimed me.
Both of these gags rely on the gross out factor, but the one from 2016 relies on only the gross out factor and nothing else, while the original is relying more on the reactions of the characters. Let's break this scene down. Venkman sees Slimer in the hallway of the hotel. Slimer stares at him menacingly. Venkman stares back in horror, and then gets on the radio and tells Ray to come help him. Ray tells him Slimer won't hurt him, but then Slimer charges at Venkman. Venkman screams. We cut away to Ray running to Venkman, but when he finds him, it turns out he's been drenched in slime, but is otherwise unharmed. Ray, instead of showing concern for his friend, is excited that one of them made physical contact with a ghost, and Egon even gets in on it.
Spengler, I'm with Venkman. He got slimed.
That's great, Ray. Save some for me.
So the humor doesn't just come from Venkman getting covered in slime, but the fact that the scene plays out like a scene from a horror movie until it subverts our expectations, and Ray and Egon are more concerned about the scientific implications than Venkman's dignity. Now compare it to the scene where Aaron gets puked on. The Ghostbusters see Gertrude and mistakenly believe she's harmless, which we already know she isn't because we saw the beginning of the movie, and attempt to make contact. Gertrude pukes on Aaron and then immediately flies out the window, leaving no time for the moment to sit. We barely get any time to see the characters' reactions before they all rush outside to chase the ghost, like the movie is in a rush to get to the next thing. And then we see the Ghostbusters getting all giddy over the fact that they saw a ghost, and having basically no reaction to the slime. So the 2016 gag relies pretty much entirely on the fact that Aaron is getting puked on and nothing more. You might also notice that in the original, Venkman gets slimed off camera, and the gag actually works better because of it, because they understood that what makes it funny is not the slime itself, but the reactions to it. So you can see how one of these gags is disgusting but clever, while the other one is just disgusting and nothing else.
Yeah, that stuff went everywhere, by the way, in every crack.
Now enjoy this ad break to help cleanse your mind of the visual of Kristen Wiig using queefs to blow bubbles with ghost vomit. Aside from many of the gags being superficial, a lot of them are ruined by bad visuals and timing, and the sad thing is, much of it could have been fixed in editing. Look at how this scene is cut together.
Aaron, you've had a hard day. Step right up, pick a gun, any gun. No! I'm sorry, not that gun.
That one's not ready. It's yours when it is.
What do you notice about this scene? There are a lot of fast cuts, unnecessary close-ups, cutaways, alternate angles, and things the scene just doesn't need. It's edited like a bad action movie. Charlie Chaplin once said, "Life is a tragedy when seen in close-up, but a comedy in long shot." It's hard to explain why, but gags tend to be funnier when they're played out in a wide frame as a single continuous shot. Just look at any Buster Keaton stunt. Conversely, when you want something to be dramatic and intense, that's when you bring the camera up close and get all the details of an actor's expressions. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule, but Ghostbusters 2016 doesn't bend the rules so much as it just disregards them entirely. I once disregarded the rules of the road, and instead of busting ghosts, I made some. This scene would have been much more effective if the camera was just locked down and the entire thing played out in a single wide shot. We didn't need a close-up of the gun being dropped back onto the table, because it would have been able to see Aaron drop it anyway. And we didn't need a cut to Patty and Abby's reactions, because they're not the important ones in this scene. Also, the background music never stops playing.
No! I'm sorry, not that gun.
The music should have stopped to punctuate the startled silence after Holtzman screamed, and then started up again when she pulled out the pocket knife. Later on in the same scene, one of the devices accidentally blows up a motorbike, and it cuts to this unnecessary overhead angle, which I can only assume was included for the sake of playing up the 3D gimmick that movies were obsessed with during the mid-2010s. Imagine if the scene played out with the exploding bike just flipping over in the background, while the characters slowly turn around and awkwardly look at the damage they've done from the foreground. Maybe the bike would fly up out of frame, then fall back down to the ground all banged up and burnt. That would have been funny. They ruined the scene even further by having the delivery guy come out and see what they've done to his bike while we still hear Abby talking off screen.
Hey, ladies, I'd call this a successful test.
Imagine if the scene ended with the Ghostbusters leaving, and then the delivery guy comes out and sees his mangled bike and just stands there looking at it, not knowing what happened or how to react. Don't you think that would have been funnier? Let's make another comparison to the original Ghostbusters. The punchline is that nobody cares about Lewis. Notice how the critical moment of the scene plays out in a single wide shot. We don't get any close-ups of any of the diners, and there aren't any crazy swooping camera movements or fast cuts. It just allows the action to play out, and then the scene ends at the moment of maximum impact. And that's another problem with Ghostbusters 2016. They have gags that just go on for too long, like this one.
I have 2 words.
Let me guess. Get out? No. He's gonna say suck it. He's not gonna say suck it.
Suck it.
You were right.
Oh my gosh, I think it might be a ghost. Oh no, it's not, it's just a bird.
The punchline should come at the end of a joke. This is a perfect counterexample. This scene could have been okay if they just exercised a little restraint and knew when to cut. We have a clear setup when Abby says, he's going to say suck it, and then Aaron says, he's not going to say suck it, but then we get a payoff when he does say suck it. The scene should have ended right there, but no. Instead, the scene drags out for another 23 seconds as the guy flips them off. Just look at how much funnier it would have been if they edited it like this.
I have 2 words for you.
Let me guess. Get out? No. He's gonna say suck it. He's not gonna say suck it.
Suck it.
Just a minor setback.
See how much more effective that is? The point has already been made when he says suck it, so why keep the scene going on longer than it has to? That doesn't make it funnier, that just makes it overstay its welcome as it peters out and becomes tedious, like when I suck it. Here's another one.
Well, I guess he going to Queens. He's gonna be the 3rd scariest thing on that train.
This scene should have cut right after Patty said he's going to be the 3rd scariest thing on that train, but it goes on for another 16 seconds longer than it needs to. I mean, we get a line from Holtzman saying what they need to do next.
We need more juice. We need to be more mobile. I know what to do.
But it isn't needed because when we see her do that later, she explains that she was inspired by the events in the tunnel.
Based on the results of the subway field test.
So it's redundant. We also get this exchange.
I almost got killed. Yeah, I know. It was so awesome. It was awesome.
This is supposed to be funny, but it's not as funny as Patty's line which came immediately before it, and which punctuated the action that just happened.
He's gonna be the 3rd scariest thing on that train.
See, that was actually pretty well timed and could have been funny, so they should have just let it sit and cut right after that. But they didn't, and instead dragged it out by trying to shove in one more funny line as the energy of the scene was already winding down. Remember when I said the movie just tries to cram in as many jokes as it can, regardless of quality? It's like they can't help themselves. They always gotta double dip and get their metaphorical saliva all over the proverbial salsa. I would tell Paul Feig to skip the extra steps and just spit directly into my mouth, but he would probably miss. Let's look at one more.
Would it be okay if I bring my cat to work sometimes?
But I have a pretty severe cat allergy.
He's a dog. His name's my cat.
Your dog's name is my cat?
And Mike Hat. Well, his full name is Michael Hat.
Not only does the scene drag on for too long, and not only does the editing detract from the humor, but this scene exemplifies yet another problem with the comedy in this movie. From what I understand, this scene was entirely improvised. And as a result of the lack of planning or direction, we ended up with this long, meandering, unfunny waste of time where the story comes to a dead stop until the movie's done embarrassing itself. In a good comedy script, the comedy is integrated into the story. Information about what's happening in the plot is delivered to the audience while the jokes are being told. And when the characters do something funny, they are advancing the plot while they do it. The flow of the story's unfolding shouldn't come to a dead stop to take time to tell a joke. Look at the Twinkie scene in the original Ghostbusters. It's a product placement, yes, but at least they did something with it. Egon uses it to illustrate the point that there's a PKE surge building up and leading to some impending disaster. It's a gag that gives us information about the plot. There's also the scene where Lewis is running down the street and starts talking to a horse. This is the first time we see him after being chased down the street by Vince Clortho, and the point of this scene is to show that he is now possessed, and it's being funny while they get this information across.
What an
This is why comedy is often said to be the most difficult genre to write. It requires careful planning and timing, but that's something this movie just doesn't have. There's also the fact that humor in movies is often contingent upon the characters and their interactions, so it's important to have strong characterization. Guess what else this movie doesn't have? Much of the humor in this movie seems to take the form of somebody doing something stupid or silly, and then somebody else reacting to it. This type of humor could work, but it doesn't work if all of the characters are stupid and silly. They can't all be the comic relief. But that's exactly the trap this movie falls into. All of the characters are these zany, over-the-top cartoon caricatures who don't act like real people, so it just comes across like they're trying too hard. It's not just the comedy that suffers for it. It's hard to believe that these people are supposed to be scientists. And no, that's not because they're women, but because they're idiots. That's probably why they felt the need to throw in a character like Kevin, who's so dumb that he makes Ghostbusters look smarter by comparison. Why write smart comedy when it's easier to just make everything dumber? I guess that's like asking why have self-reflection when it's easier to just call everyone sexist. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with having a goofy, dumb character, but in order for a goofy and dumb character to be funny, they need a smarter and more serious character to play off them and react to their antics. In comedy parlance, this is what's known as a straight man. It's why Costello had Abbott, why Laurel had Hardy, why Pinky had Brain, why SpongeBob had Squidward, and so on. A goofy character by herself isn't funny, she's just annoying. And when you put a bunch of goofy characters together, all it does is it makes them even more annoying. The characters in the original Ghostbusters all worked well together because of their clashing personalities. You had Venkman, a snarky, condescending, womanizing prick who nonetheless had a moral center and did what he felt was right. You had Ray, a schlubby, somewhat wormy but friendly and almost childlike man with a generally positive outlook. You had Egon, a stoic intellectual and weirdo focused on his current task so intensely that it came at the expense of his social life and ability to interact with normal people. And then you have Winston, the black guy. The personalities of these characters play off each other, they complement each other, and they conflict with each other, thus facilitating not only humorous banter, but also interesting relationships between the characters. But in Ghostbusters 2016, they feel the need to try to be funny with every line they say. Instead of structuring a scene around a setup and premise and letting the comedy flow from that, they constantly improv a bunch of crap about dogs named Mike Hat and stuff like that. Instead of crafting the jokes and gags with wit, misdirection, and timing, they just throw a bunch of crap at the wall to see what sticks. And the characters suffer for it because they don't let the comedy arise from the interaction between their personalities. In the original movie, we would see Venkman make snarky comments and comebacks, and Egon would say and do weird things without realizing he was being weird. The funny things they did fit their characters, but in this movie, every character delivers the same general type of humor, and so their personalities don't show through. It's weak comedy going hand in hand with weak characterization. They can't all be the comic relief, but they all try to be, and that's why they all fail. It's like not having a designated driver. It's just gonna end with you and your friends at the police station while a crane fishes your car out of the fountain in front of the Bellagio. The only structured joke in the movie that I can remember without rewatching it is not one that I remember because it was funny, but because it's like a perfect example of how to fail to tell a joke. I'm talking about the stupid recurring gag about wonton soup. It goes something like this. Oh boy, I sure am excited to eat my wonton soup, but wait, there's only one wonton in the soup. How disappointing. Okay, let's try this wonton soup again. Oh no! It seems that once more my soup is bereft of delicious wontons. And now I'm angry. Alright, let's try ordering wonton soup one more time. Finally! There's more than one wonton in the soup. But alas, now there are too many. Oh, what cruel irony. That's it, that's the payoff. Aside from raising the question of why Abby doesn't just order from one of the 6,000 other Chinese restaurants in New York if she's constantly dissatisfied by the service of this one, having a scene come to a grinding halt for the sake of a stupid recurring gag about wonton soup isn't funny. Just look at how long this goes on while nothing happens to advance the plot. That's about 30 seconds of stupid nonsense that has nothing to do with anything and isn't even funny. Again, look at the Twinkie scene in the original Ghostbusters. That was a gag that actually added something to the movie because it was actually being used to explain something about the plot, so it wasn't just pointless filler like the kind you find in Twinkies, or wontons. That's the difference between that movie and this one. They actually cared and used their time to tell the story, as opposed to having the story stop dead in its tracks for the sake of a stupid running gag leading up to an unfunny payoff. Oh, and that's another thing. See, typically when a movie has a running gag, it's building up to something. In this case, Abby complains about not getting enough wontons in her soup, but at the end, she gets too many. Do you get it? At first she didn't get enough wontons, but then she got too many. Ha ha, what a knee slapper. It's almost as funny as, "Orange, you glad I didn't say banana." Hey, here's an idea for how we can make this wonton joke work. Maybe you have a couple scenes where Abby complains about not getting enough wontons, but then sometime in the third act, you have a scene where the Ghostbusters are chasing a ghost down the streets of New York and ends up crashing the car into the back of a restaurant supply truck, and 1,000 wontons come pouring out and bury them. I mean, maybe that's not all that hilarious, but it's funnier than what we got. And on top of that, the ghost they're chasing gets away to go off to do something evil, and now the Ghostbusters don't have a car, so there's consequences and it's actually incorporated into the plot and isn't just a waste of screen time. You see that? I just came up with a gag that's also a plot device. Hey Sony, you wanna hire me to write your next movie? I'll do it cheap. I'll even work for wontons. So I guess that brings us to the end of this review. I actually do have quite a bit more to say about Ghostbusters 2016, but I'm sick of thinking about it. I just want this review to be over already. So I think I'm just gonna end it here. Don't expect a part 3. So like, comment, subscribe, support me on Patreon, and send me your fan art. I'm done. Bye.